Hey guys, Rob from Zborgaming here, and today we have the M4A1 weapon guide. This by far is our most extensive weapon guide to date. We have information on the M4 coming up. We have all the attachment unlock levels. We do extensive recoil testing on a whole variety of the attachments for the M4, as well as offer up to 15 different loadouts. Many of which we test and show you the results of. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the M4A1 is the third assault rifle that you'll unlock, and you'll unlock it at level 6. So it unlocks quite early in the game, and this is probably considered one of the best weapons in the game, right alongside the MP5 SMG. The camo requirements here in the bottom left are standard across all the assault rifle class. And if you want at any point in time, go ahead, pause the video, take a look at this. But I do have all these weapon infographics on my website here at zborgaming.com. I'll have a link to it in the description below, so go ahead, check that out. You can make a screenshot of it, download it if you want. Again, this is for your information. So the base stats on the M4, it does 42 damage to the head, 28 damage everywhere else, and that's within the base damage range. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. A standard mag size of 30 bullets and a pretty fast fire rate at 833 RPMs. Reload time of 1.39 seconds is quite fast, and you can speed it up even more with sleight of hand. So, in the upper right hand corner here, we have all the attachments listed out by the attachment type, and we have all the unlock levels with them. So if you're curious as to when any of the attachments unlock, you can go ahead right here, and we have all these detailed out for you. So if we move on with the M4, we have a couple of pro style loadouts you can use here. We have a balance setup, which is quite versatile. It's a very good loadout. And we have another one here which offers a little bit of stealth to it with some run and gun. We have a whole bunch more loadouts coming later in the video after we do some of our extensive recoil testing. As far as some other advanced stats, the bullet drop-off range for the M4, first drop-off is at 28 meters, and then at 50 meters, and then there's anything over 50 meters. As far as movement speed, the movement speed is 95%, and the strafe speed is 50%, which are pretty average for all the assault rifles. The recoil pattern, which you'll see coming up soon, is up and then drifts off to the right. And the sprint out times are 267 and 400 milliseconds for your standard and tactical sprint outs. Now, the M4 does offer some unique ammo in that, in addition to the 5.56 NATO rounds, you also get some 9mm rounds, as well as some 458 rounds. And we do some additional testing with those coming up here. You will get 32 rounds instead of 30 with the 9mm, but it does lower your base damage as well as the range, so be mindful of that. The range profile, instead of 0.2850, now drops to 0.1525. Now with the 458 SOCOM rounds, this has increased damage, but only 10 rounds in the magazine and a much slower fire rate of 652. I'll get into some more detail on some of the specialized M4 attachments, but it does have 5 different barrel configurations, and if you want to spend some more time, go ahead and take a look at these here, but I will talk about these more here coming up soon. So if we take a look at the aim stability here for the M4, and you can see here's after you're shooting the bullets, it sort of kicks up and to the right. It has fairly good idle sway. There's not a whole lot. And as far as our recoil testing, we're going to get into a whole bunch of slides here now where we test probably 15 of the attachments for the M4. So we did this testing on Candor Hideout. If you watch any of my other weapon guides, you'll know that this is where I do the majority of all my testing at. And at this distance, 25 meters, all that base damage will apply. We're under that 28 meter range. So the first thing we took a look at here is we compared the ammo attachments. So here is the base recoil profile for the M4 with the 5.56 NATO rounds, and you can see it drifts up and then it drifts off to the right. With the 9mm rounds, you can see here that it has a much tighter recoil pattern, and you cut probably 30 to 40% of that overall vertical recoil out. but keep in mind you do lose damage and range, so you're going to have to be a lot closer to your opponent. Now with the 458 SOCOM rounds, you can see here that you have just a pretty nice straight vertical recoil pattern. Now the box that I put there is basically about where the first 10 rounds, all these boxes are the same. So you can see here that these para rounds put quite a few rounds right here in the box. But on the whole, down here it says these SOCOM rounds have worse recoil, but when you compare it to the base NATO rounds, all 10 bullets here are in the box, and you've got 9 or 10 here in the box for the NATO round, so I really don't see a whole lot of recoil difference. So I'm not seeing that as much of a penalty in reality. So that extra damage and range you get, in our opinion, is worth it, but you do lose those rounds. And then, unless you're attacking at distance, it really helps to have all those extra rounds in the barrel. So moving on, we're going to take a look at the 3 different barrels which affect your recoil. The first is the 11.5 Commando, and this actually makes your recoil worse, and you can see here by the pattern it sprays that it does have a worse recoil pattern than the base, actually without any barrel at all. If you put the M16 barrel on, you can see here it does lower the overall recoil. Now keep in mind there are 30 bullets here, yet there aren't 30 dots, so some of the bullets go back into the same holes, and for purposes of testing it's pretty impossible to tell which ones those are, but I tried to put these little boxes on here as comparisons. Now keep in mind, let's move on, actually we'll move on to the next barrel here, the Corvus Custom Marksman, and again here you can see that the recoil is not too far off of the base, but there is a slight improvement here. So as far as some of the penalties for these barrels, the M16 and the Corvus Custom, you will lose some ADS speed, 2 frames with the M16, but only 1 frame with the Marksman barrel. As far as movement speed, you're going to lose 4% with the M16 and 3% with the Marksman barrel. If you use that Commando, yes, your recoil is worse, but you get a 2 frame faster ADS speed and a 2% faster movement speed. So it does come with some nice movement boosts. So if we move on from the barrels, we're going to look at the muzzle and grip attachments now. And so as far as the muzzle brake, you can see here this is supposed to help with recoil stabilization. And that basically helps stabilize the weapon as you're shooting it, helps a little bit with some of the horizontal recoil, and I think it also helps with some of the visual recoil that you see while you're shooting the weapon. You are going to lose some of that aim stability, you'll get a little more idle sway, and you'll also get some additional ADS speed penalty, but I think it's about less than a frame, so there isn't a whole lot of penalty as far as ADS here. The compensator will help with your vertical recoil. You can see it does cut out probably 20% of that overall vertical recoil, and you also here you have 4 bullets in a nice tight pattern here, whereas on the base recoil pattern you can see how your first 6 bullets has quite a substantial jump when compared with the first 4 to 6 bullets over here, which is part of why the compensator is a very common attachment, especially for fighting that vertical recoil. The rubberized grip tape, you can see here in our testing, you will lose some of that idle sway, and I'm not really seeing a whole lot of benefit here when you're talking recoil control. As far as vertical recoil or horizontal stabilization, there really doesn't appear to be a substantial benefit with the rubberized grip tape. Okay, moving on, we're going to look at the first set of underbarrel attachments, and in this case we looked at the 2 angle grips and the bipod. You can see here the Commando foregrip really helps get rid of a lot of that horizontal jump. You get a pretty nice straight vertical pattern, and it also helps with your aim stability, so that idle sway with a minimal impact, 1 to 2% for your movement speed. Tactical foregrip, you can see it jumps around a little bit more than the Commando foregrip does, because you don't get that recoil stabilization, and you also lose about the same amount of movement speed. Now with the bipod, we did some additional testing in other videos, and we've really only found that you get a lot of the benefit when you're prone. So this recoil pattern here is when you're prone laying on the ground. You can see it does have a much better recoil profile, but you basically sacrifice all mobility by laying on the ground in order to get that. So it frankly isn't an overall useful attachment in our opinion. So if we look at the second set of underbarrel attachments, which are your stick grips, as I'll call them, the Merc foregrip, you can see here you get some added hipfire accuracy as well as recoil control. And all three of these grips, you can see limited your overall vertical recoil by about the same amount. You get some added aim stability with the Ranger foregrip that you don't get with the other two. The only benefit here now, as far as this ADS speed, this is less than 1 frame, so it's really very minimal for the Merc foregrip and Ranger foregrip, but you will lose some strafe speed, so you'll strafe a little slower. Now with the Operator foregrip, you'll lose about 2 frames on your ADS speed, but that's the only penalty. So let's go ahead, and now we've started putting some loadouts together here. So based off of all the other knowledge we've gained with the other attachments, the first loadout we took a look at here was the compensator with the M16 barrel, commando foregrip, and the rubberized grip. And you can remember that initial profile goes all the way up here past the window frame. You can see we cut a good 30 to 40% out, and we have a pretty nice tight pattern with not a lot of horizontal recoil and a nice fairly tight vertical for the first 10 to 15 bullets or so. So that loadout performed quite well. Now loadouts 2 and 3 were actually offered up by a subscriber. So we went ahead, took a look at these. You can see you get a little more horizontal jump here with loadout 2, and loadout 3 has a little more vertical recoil. Now again here, these only have 3 attachments each on them. So you could throw some extra ammo on here if you want. You could throw an additional optic. Now I will say that all of these tests I did with the VLK 3.0X optic on at 25 meters. So the reason I only put 3 or 4 here is it gives you a little flexibility with the loadout. If you want to add a perk or you want to add an ammo or an optic, it allows you to do that. So with loadout test 4, we put the muzzle brake on, the M16 barrel, the Merc foregrip, and this now has the 9mm rounds. And you can see you have quite a tight profile here. A lot of bullets here right on target. So this was quite a successful test in our opinion, and definitely take a look at this loadout test 4 and keep that as an option. So now loadout test 5 used the compensator, the Corvus custom barrel, the Ranger foregrip, and in this case we used those 458 rounds. So you can see we had a pretty nice tight pattern here for the first 5 bullets or so, and then a little jump afterwards. So if you can really hit those first 2 to 3 bullets, you should be able to kill your opponent, but you're going to have to be reloading quite a bit. So you may want to consider throwing sleight of hand on here or fully loaded. Something where you'll get some extra ammo. Alright guys, we're going to look at a couple additional loadouts here, and these are M16 builds. We have a 458 SOCOM loadout, so we went ahead, used that M16 stock and barrel and threw the 458 rounds. And you can see here we really did not get a great recoil profile, given that the 458 build we had here had a much better recoil profile. So if you want to use that 458, I suggest using this profile here as opposed to this one here. We then did a more standard M16 build with the compensator, M16 stock and barrel, and the commando foregrip. You can see here overall a pretty decent recoil profile. We then subbed out the commando foregrip and threw the burst perk in to see what the burst profile would look like, and all 30 bullets went into 10 bullet holes here, so we had a nice tight recoil pattern at 25 meters. And then we went ahead and we extended the same loadout out to 50 meters, and you can see here still a little bit spread out, but on the whole a pretty decent recoil pattern. So we're going to move on to some additional loadouts now. So moving on, we then tested the 9mm para rounds. So this is actually the same loadout at 3 different ranges. So the first range was 25 meters, the second range was 16 meters, and this third range we tested here was at 8 meters. Now the reason we did that is with those para rounds, it changes that base damage from 0 to 15 to 25. So at that longest range, this is what your recoil pattern is going to look like. There's quite a bit of spread. So you really want to make sure that if you're using a mobility loadout like what we have here with the commando barrel, the Merc foregrip, the para ammo, stipple grip, no stock, this is a very high mobility loadout. You're going to want it very close engagements and you'll be able to control that recoil really nicely. So we did some additional testing here at 8 meters away with the 9mm para rounds. This is the loadout here we just showed you. And so the second test we did, we swapped out that Merc foregrip and we threw the tack laser in, and you can see we lost some of that vertical and horizontal stability. The Merc foregrip doesn't say it, but that hipfire accuracy I think really has a big benefit even when aiming down sight. So you can see here that swapping just the one attachment definitely changed that recoil profile. Last thing we did was we then took off that tack laser and we threw on the monolithic suppressor for more of a stealth build, and you can see here recoil profile is pretty similar to what we had here in test 2, but you get the added stealth and a little bit of boost in the damage with this loadout here. So with that, a whole lot of information in one video. Feel free to go back, take a look at some of the loadouts, try them out. Thanks for watching. Substantial amount of content here. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment, like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and we'll have more weapon guides coming out soon. Thanks for watching.